taking the energy out of the mentalizing, we used to call it, and dropping it through and anchoring it into the heart. And then the breath gives you the reverence for your life. That is your sacredness in this deeper level within your heart. That's where we do go with the records. And even though we work with the crown extending itself, it's held in the heart.
Hi, welcome everybody. I am so thrilled to have as a guest Ellena Lieberman, who is an Akashic Records consultant. I'm so excited to have her on the show because we do our process the same. And so what we're going to discuss is just kind of how that process works, what the history is of the process, and how this all came about. So welcome, Ellena.
Wonderful to be here. I'm just thrilled. And it's really exciting reflecting on these years, 34 years doing this.
Yeah.
It's some time.
Yeah. So you've been doing this a while. You have all kinds of experience.
I guess I do. Yes. Really.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored and I'm so excited to have you here. But I think where I'd like to start with this is kind of if you go back from the beginning of your story, let's just get a little bit of background so that we can understand how this evolved for you.
For me personally, and I want to get into Mary's story there too quickly, very briefly. My husband threw his back out in the airport, and he received a postcard from his chiropractor that a woman was coming to town named Mary Parker. And the next week he went back for an appointment, and he said, did you receive he says to the chiropractor who sent it, he said, did you receive this card? I don't know what this is. And the chiropractor, who was Jeff McComb, said, I sent it to you because Mary Parker's coming to town. And so he went, and there was a man, Ed Comney was there, and some other original people. It was about 1989. Mm. And he went to the first class, went to the second class in Chicago, but one of the first classes, and came home, and he said, I don't know what this is, but you're going to love it. Yeah, you have to go and see. There's this woman, and you ask these questions, and you're working with other people, and you see all different things, and I don't know what's going on here, but this is really interesting. So then he went to the next class. Or the next day, the level 1 and 2 were one class with first day and second day. So then he had 30 days to practice. So my sister and I pestered him. And you could practice all day long. It wasn't like you waited any time between. So like 3-4 times a day, we kept saying, give us, at the time it was called a reading. Uh-huh. Give us a reading. Go. What happens? Open that up. Ask. I'm going to ask another question. What is this? And I got very intrigued. And so he said, listen, the next time this woman comes around, we'll go to the Friday night gathering, and then you can go take a class. So I went, and I took the class with my sister. And it was phenomenal. The class had no guidelines. It had no guidelines. They had an order. They had the 3 prayers, but you move from one person to the next. So you couldn't get attached. And the first man I sat down in front of, I opened the records. I just remember in a chair, and he was angry. He was going through a divorce, and at the anger, jumped out at me, and it threw me back. The energy threw me back, and then Mary came and she put her hands on my shoulder, said, "Just sit down and be calm. Just straighten your back and be calm." And then I said to him, "You're angry. I see pictures." And it was like watching a movie. And that was the beginning of the journey. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, between the first and second day, I knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. It was the light. There was a level going on there, that light, that I wanted to step in and have part of my life. And it happened for me very quickly that I knew I wanted to do that. And so that was the beginning of the story. Beginning of the story.
Yeah. So, how do you use the records now, today?
I'm a professional consultant. It is a source of income. I also use them for deep inner search, inner development. It is basically a developmental tool, and it moves you towards your soul level. There's no question. And the people I began with, all became deeply imbued with a deeper spiritual or religious path, which each one differently, everyone what was right for him. And I want to say right now that one of Mary's priorities was that the Akashic Records are for all people, and that you find the deep place, that silent depth in yourself that you can move into. But it is different for different people, to not impose a belief system on people. And when we get really into our spiritual or religious beliefs, we get orientations, but they're not to be imposed on other people. Right. So she was very clear about that.
Yeah. 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 And I feel like that's really the time that we're in, to where, it's being presented to us in so many different ways. I think Mary she understood that, a long time ago. But where we are now with this new energy coming in, it's becoming more and more present or apparent that we follow our own path, and what's right for each and every one of us, because we're all different, and not truly just fall under one umbrella of one specific way of doing something, because it may not be specifically in alignment with what our soul's path is.
Yes.
And I find, what my messages keep coming up is emptying the mind. Letting go of those old belief systems, that construction. That's not really what I meant. I meant structure. That we're put in this specific box, and where we're in this journey is to break out of that box and find the truth of who we are, and not live under the guidelines of others. I think that's extremely important. Yeah.
Absolutely. And part of it really is that the individual, first of all, moving out, taking the energy out of the mentalizing, we used to call it, and dropping it through and anchoring it into the heart, and then the breath gives you the reverence for your life. That's what we call it, reverence for your life. That is your sacredness in this deeper level within your heart. That's where we do go with the records. And even though we work with the crown extending itself, it's held in the heart. And that's very significant for what we do. Very important work. So I absolutely agree. And not labeling people. What you find is every person's very distinctive anyway.
Yeah.
So we take them out of the label, the box, so we can begin to fine tune into the actual essence of the person. The essence is very important.
Well, and I think that you're touching on something else that I think is extremely important for people to understand in the way that the Akashic Records can be used. And, it's a lot more deeper in depth than just predicting the future or telling you about past lives. And I think what you're describing is the true essence of how I feel that the Akashic Records can assist us. It's on a deeper connection, deeper knowing. It helps us to become more connected with the truth of who we are, and that energy that surrounds us and is within us. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yes, it is. It's the sense of connection and what you're describing that really brings me back to want to talk about Mary, actually,
Uh-huh.
because her life was very interesting. It's
Hmm.
not what one would think, or what you might call initially what people say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, or these kinds of things. She didn't
Yeah.
fit a lot of that. She
Hmm.
didn't fit a lot of things.
Hmm.
So uh, I do want to go there because she when we talk about the lineage that she created, there's a brilliant example of it. She wrote a little booklet, Mary,
Hmm.
called "A New Beginning from an Ancient Source," and
Yeah.
we have a few left. It will go back into print. We'll put it back into print,
Mm-hmm.
but it talks about her experiences. But it also describes her inner process with the experience, and
Mm-hmm.
it's present, it's very inward, and it's deep, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still, and it has great dimension within, and a sense of deepening, like a living silence
Mm-hmm.
inside of us. So
Yeah.
I want to mention that today.
Well, let's go back to really basically who Mary Parker is, and the reason why. When you and I first started talking about doing this program, you have a very strong connection with Mary Parker, but a lot of people don't understand what role she played in our lives. So I wanted to just kind of share with everybody that there's. I think that Mary Parker's influence is huge in the Akashic Record field and being able to promote and understand. But what I experienced from Mary Parker is the prayer. And my teacher was taught by somebody, I believe, if I get the story straight, my teacher was taught by somebody that was taught by Mary Parker. You were taught directly from Mary Parker. So, what I would like to share with people is what's Mary Parker's story from how she even became connected. Can you share that story?
Sure. Let me say first that Mary Parker came from Texas. She was first married at 13 years old. And And she lied and said she was 16 years old, I believe. She tells
Wow.
that story.
Yeah.
And she came from a certain background. Mary Parker, I believe her original religion was Mormon. And let me say, at the end of her life, she went back to that. And
Okay.
I can give an interesting reason why that she
Mhm.
told. Um, Later, uh, she remarried, and she married a man who was in management of oil fields. He was quite a successful man, and that was in the Midland, Odessa area. If you ever fly in there, you'll see all the oil fields.
Mhm.
Sometimes they haven't been in use, and then they started up again. And Mary also went with him to Saudi Arabia a few times, which is an interesting fact about her. But as Mary got older, she became interested in many spiritual studies. Now, let me say she had. I knew of 5 children. I'm not positive if she had 5 children and 7 grandchildren or 7 children. But I knew the girls, the 4 girls, and there was a son who was a minister. And Mary was very interested early on in the teachings of the philosopher Gurdjieff and some of his teachings, and she read many different styles of teaching. Later, um, she took a class from a man named Johnny Prochaska. Now, in her early stories about him, he was from a Spanish noble family that left Spain when the Franco regime took over. People fled when that takeover happened. His family left and moved to a certain area in Mexico. And in one interview, it says, she said, they were people in a certain class. They all had to have prearranged marriages. She says that in one interview. So, but he was very experimental. He loved metaphysics. So that's the person Mary learned to read the records from. And she was very intrigued with it, but she had a lot of questions about it. She always checked herself out. And she writes in her book, and I do want to go into this whole phenomenon. When she was even practicing, there were people who were completely healed from her consultations, her readings. It's called readings then. And she was worried about that. She was worried about that. In her words, I developed a deep concern that perhaps I had interfered with their life pattern. So I made a decision, a conscious choice, to do the records work only with my friends. So she did not want to go out at that point traveling. There were two other incidents I knew about. One was that she went to someone's home and they lost, I believe it was a diamond ring. And Mary was in the records and she knew where the ring was. And it actually scared Mary. She didn't want it to be on that level. There was also a case with some paintings that they couldn't find. Same type of thing. She didn't want to go out among people. She also thought of herself as a little old Texas housewife. You'll hear her say that many times. She actually could not reconcile. She wanted an organization, and it wasn't really till years later that she would accept that she could found an organization. So on one level, it was this little old Texas housewife, and on another level, these miraculous things would happen. But where it intersected in her was she was very down to earth. She was very loving. Even unusual metaphysical things, it was always brought down to earth. How can you use it? Where is it inside of you? And there you have a basic precept of the lineage of Archie, where it's coming from Mary Parker. Because it's not about going out somewhere. It's about bringing it in, bringing it down, moving into the depth of the inner silence, moving to the place that's deeply touched inside of you, feeling like you're returning to yourself. I felt that many times when I worked with her. It's like I got too far out. And she used to say, how do these people get so far afield from themselves? She used to say that to me at the end of the day. What did they get in their minds? And it was always about coming home, being yourself, being a loving person. There was a homeness. You can go home. And I'll tell you, that appealed a great deal to me. It's like, I don't know how I ever got to how did I ever get here? I don't know. I'm so confused. And she would take you and bring you back, just like you were sitting at the kitchen table and having coffee. That was the feeling of working with Mary Parker for me. Or walking a little walk. Let's go outside, take a little walk. It was like that. And when you were finished, you were on the other side. So it was a warm feeling. So that's the story. She physically passed away September 15th, 2015, in her middle 80s. And she had traveled far, and towards the end, she said when she went back to the Mormon church. She used to say, you know what, Ellena, when you go into the inner sanctum of the Mormon church, it feels like you're in the records. She would go. She would go to the church. She also admired the Mormon church because they looked after their own. People who were struggling, they had the equivalent of a whole department store that you could choose from to get your things to support your life.
Yeah.
So she was very impressed with that.
Yeah. So you had mentioned Johnny Pahuska, if I'm
Yes.
saying that
Well, it's
correctly.
actually Prochaska or the Czechoslovakian, the father was Czechoslovakian, is like Prochaska or something.
Yeah. So do you know? Can you repeat his story? Because he's the person that received the prayer to begin with. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell
What
that story?
we have it in our manuals. I also heard it a number of times over the years from her.
Hmm.
So it changed a little bit and augmented, but basically, he traveled between Mexico and Texas. The core story around him is that he was an engineer, I think, for the service. He was an engineer and he went back and forth, but he also seemed to have other odd jobs. But he was basically interested in metaphysics, and he went with as above, so below, and hermetic studies and things like that. He was very intrigued. For 2 years, he had a recurring dream of a older Mayan woman coming to him and saying, "I'm waiting for you," for 2 years. Then his plane was late, and he wandered around in the barrios, and he wandered up a street, and the woman was there. And she went up to him and said, "I've been waiting for you." And they went into the pyramids in Mexico. And in that, she was an old woman. There's a depiction, which I read it in my level 1 classes, where she transforms into a light being, and is no longer stooped but ageless, and she's veiled in this blue light, and she takes him to the edge of the pyramid, and there, as he looks down, he sees all of the Mayans and all these people in garments from many ages. And he said they didn't look like zombies. They looked like kings and queens and elegant. And the woman looks at him and says to him, "They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you to be their voice." And he looks at her and said, "You can't," basically says, "You can't mean it. I'm not equipped to do anything like that." And then he takes the job, and he says yes. And there are bells ringing, and the people turn to him, and he begins his work by receiving a prayer. And it does not say in mine, it's in an old language he could not understand, and in gold lettering, and she lays the prayer across the crown of his head. And it is an initiation, an anointment, and that's how he gets the prayer to read the records. And then it says in Mary's booklet, then he brings them back to the present in the class. He said, "And this is the prayer in English, and we will be using it." The class was conducted in English. And from that point on, Mary used the prayer. Now, when we were traveling, we being with my sister, we met one other person who had a reading, a consultation by Johnny Prochaska let's see, I can't think, we were in North Carolina, um, Asheville, South Carolina, I think that is. In Asheville, we met a person. We were teaching there, and she said, "I had a consultation in 1991, I think she said." So he was still alive, but he must have died shortly after. And only one other teacher in Mary's class, I believe, wanted to be a teacher, and the rest didn't go on.
Yeah.
Something happened. So that's the initial story around it.
Mhm.
And it's amazing.
Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes. It made me start crying. Where this emotions come from, but it's so sacred, and I think where we are so, I don't know if you want to say gifted, blessed, or, obviously, the more that we know about how the universe works, we know that there's no accidents. And to be able to have the gift of being able to repeat this prayer and understanding that connection is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And it's not something to take for granted. And
No.
it's to be honored and to understand the sacredness of it. And that connection is to be sacred. It's not just something that you do on a whim. It's not just something to do just for the fun of it. And I think that that's probably why people drop off from doing it, because I don't think that they can really feel it in that essence of who they are like we do. And for those of us that have embodied this understanding are the ones that continue to do this work for 30, 40 years, 20 years for me. So thanks, Johnny.
Yeah.
Good job. And thanks to Mary for finding him and whatever that path and journey was. What a great gift it was to all of us. It's
Yes.
pretty special. So I do want to jump into something really quickly. This is kind of getting off the track, but we call ourselves Akashic Records consultants. And
Yes.
that's the way that I was taught. My teacher told me that this is what our title is a consultant. It's not a reader. So can you go into that story about that?
Yes. There are guidelines that we use to uphold what is precious to us in the Akashic Records, or the Lineage, Akashic Record Consultants International. And we've gone out of our way. I personally take these precepts very, very much to heart, because I've seen how they work. When I say I've seen, I've experienced is a better way to say it. So when we were out there in the beginning, you'd go in a room of people, and sometimes the people would say, "Hey, I'm getting a real hit on you. I'm really picking up something about you. Let me read you." Or many different kinds of people say, "Well, I just want to give you a reading. I want to do that." And Mary, after variations on that theme were going on quite a bit, Mary said, "We are to sound professional.
Mm-hmm.
I would like everyone to be professional and committed to do this work." And what we're doing is consulting the Akashic Records.
Right.
Another word we use now is access. We don't use the word read. First of all, read implies something. It's in another sense that you're looking at something and reading it, like words. And it's possible you see words, but there's so many ways of receiving what we call information. There's so much. So we are consulting the records. And she really wanted that distinction made. And it talks about an attitude. We have a certain attitude of reverence, respect, and she was very much about that. And she was very concerned, even when she gave her consultations, that you respect the person, you're not telling them what to do. She used to say kind of jokingly, "Am I making any sense to you?" But she was checking on the connection. And so that's how we came to consultants, and that is what we call ourselves.
Yeah, and it's funny because my connection with, I don't know what you want to call it, that the umbrella of metaphysics, which I don't really even consider this metaphysics for some reason. It feels different. It feels so spiritual and so connected to the divine that I don't know, it just kind of has a little different energy to me.
Yes, uh, I agree with you. Often metaphysics is very mental. It is
Yeah.
very mental.
Yeah.
It's very elaborate, and Mary was s- simple in her statements, but profound.
Hmm.
It resonated in the heart. If it resonates in the heart, then it's true.
Right.
And what was interesting is that she experienced a lot of highly metaphysical things, but she would bring them home.
Hmm.
There's this tremendous example in the beginning of her book about it was, in fact, if I may talk about that now, because it's amazing. It's when
Yeah.
she was anointed to do the work.
Hmm.
And she had decided she would be only with friends. She did not want to travel. She did not want to do it professionally at that point. Her husband was still living. That's another point. Something happened when he passed away, her second husband. And she had two friends over, um, and they were sitting there. They were working in the records together, and there appeared three personages in golden light at the door. Her living room connected into her dining room. Three personages appeared. The woman was in golden light. She had white hair with a golden crown around it, and she was carrying an urn of oil, golden oil. And her belt, which was Grecian style, had a figure eight in it. The men were the same, only the infinity sign, the figure eight, was at their throats.
Mm.
And everyone was silent. They walked in, and the two other people got up out of their chairs with Mary and went up to the personages, and they were anointed with the oil. The oil never got less in the diamond shaped urn, or never diminished, and they could feel the oil all the way over their bodies. And then they went back, the personages disappeared, and she sat down, and they were in a deep silence. And then she thought, well, maybe I'm hallucinating. And she asked what their experience is. And it was the same experience.
Mm.
It was the key points here is that the inner silence deepened very, very deep. She moved into it. She awakened a space inside of herself that took her deeper within, and she felt like it was a new beginning for her life, and so did the other people. This is a very dramatic moment in her life. So she took it in as the total way of her life. She didn't, what we used to call, trip out, that she was led into something, that she is seeing so many things, and you hear all of this, that she channeling so many levels. Nothing like that. It was integrated into the depths of her being. And the whole thrust of our work is inner development, going so deep that it is in the transcendent field that is unbounded into one.
Mm.
That's the Akashic field. And that's, when we talk about a new energy coming in, it's an expansion of one that we experience. It's when it was, is debatable, was, is, will be, is very debatable. It is. It's beingness.
Hmm.
Beingness is beyond time and space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was a tremendous. It's a very compelling narrative.
Hmm. Yeah. So, how, I'm kind of curious to know, because we're kind of focusing on Mary, but I'm curious about your experience. How would you explain your own experience in this connection?
I was not one of the, you mean in that, I wasn't one of the friends who
No,
was.
just what you've experienced over
What
time.
I've experienced. I've experienced things that are very deep and feel like the essence of the person. It depends on our questions. If it's more
Mhm.
practical, it can stay on a deeper level, but not that depth. And then, for instance, there have been experiences that were totally miraculous. In other words, a moment that I don't know what I'm going to do, and suddenly show me what to do, and it's laid out for you. I had that
Mhm.
experience. I've had experiences of opening someone's Akashic records. Um, you're seeing something fantastic you didn't expect to see about that person. It seems who they really are does not seem to be at all the persona.
Yep.
Um, in rooms, especially large rooms, I've seen masters who seem to be more physical. They work very great beings, usually three around each person with golden robes. And yet, I'll be the first to tell you that those are levels of consciousness, and that's how I saw them.
Hmm.
But I saw them. And yet there will be very practical things. We used to what's in alignment for me to do? Give me a list to do today. We used to, that was a process. Give
Yeah.
me a list spiritually to do and practically, what do I do? Give me the first top three things on the list so I can write it down because I don't know where to even start.
Yeah.
That's real too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's interesting though that, what I always call the Akashic Records, the way that I use them, I always call it like spiritual psychology, because they do have a tendency to get down into the core of an individual to help them to process and to elevate to a higher level of understanding than what they may be whenever we come into it. And you had mentioned about seeing not the physical person, but seeing the true. And I've always said that the greatest gift that I have is that whenever I do a reading, I get to see you. I get to see the truth of who you are. I don't
Yeah.
see the physical body. I don't see what the mind's created. I don't see who you are through my filters or my lenses. I get the great gift of seeing the truest, purest essence of who you are. And
Yes.
I don't think that there's a better gift than that. I mean, every time I do a reading, it's like, you're amazing. This
Yes.
person that I'm talking to is amazing.
I would really like to address that because
Mhm.
most people can't see their magnificence,
Mhm.
and they almost don't believe you. There are people come and say, "Okay, I'm prepared for the worst. You can tell me what's going to happen. I'm prepared for the worst."
Yeah.
And I want to say that really, it's that we don't tap into our inner esteem, beauty. We err much more that way, so we may compensate. But actually, I do want to make the point that there is an underlying beauty that when we keep going there through grace,
Mhm.
we let go of the overlays, the filters, the shells, the clouds
Mhm.
that somehow we took on in an effort to be loved most of
Yeah.
the time, and let it go.
Right.
Let it go and have an inner illumination
Mhm.
that's just as real as our criticism, more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And being able to connect to that essence, we as human beings, that's not anywhere in our teachings. It's our parents aren't going to say go inward. That's a very unusual thing to be conditioned to, or to be able to understand that true connection that each one of us has. So I think it's something to be able to honor, and to understand that we all have that connection, because we all live so much from our minds and our belief
Yes. And
systems.
Mary used to emphasize that. Now go
Yeah.
in, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about our teachings. How, because I keep, I know that you have a lot of different things to discuss about our teachings, but you keep referring back to like level 1 and level 2. So, explain, kind of give us a rundown on what you're referring to.
Okay, so level 1, what we call level 1 at this time, is working within oneself with the Akashic Records, which is primary. It's primary. If you stop that phase miraculously, if when you get real busy with other people and you're dropping that part, that it's not, you'll get imbalanced, and people will eventually not be connecting because you're not connecting into that deep place within yourself. Mm-hmm. It's very important. You can, after a time, if that energy is gone, you can really feel it. So level 1 gives the primary connecting to know when you are accessing and keyed into the Akashic Records, your own Akashic Records. And there are some primary guidelines around that, and developments, processes, depending on the teacher, to get you to that place and to really look at letting go of anything that you're filtering that might be in the way or keep you from going as deep as your authentic nature allows you to at that time. And then it continues to grow. And so level 2 is accessing the records of another person. And that dynamic, as you say, it's really amazing when you start to make that connection. We have a beautiful pillar of light, we call in, plus the prayer itself is a metaphysical shield that surrounds us. So we're really filled with light internally and externally. Mm-hmm. The primary teaching is that you want to be very present and to keep tuning into the energy. There's always energy behind the energy. So you keep tuning in, remaining present. There's no before, there's no after. It's the moment together. And to allow that to deepen so you can go home. Her primary teaching is to go home right now. You can go home to your spiritual home and say it simply, and be in a state of deep truth, in a place in your heart that you really trust. And those would be her primary teachings for us. She acted with a great deal of love towards people. Mm-hmm. My experience with her was one of a very deep love, and to let go of anything that was shame, blame, all of that.
Yeah, and which that's part of the record's messages. I mean, I get that a lot whenever I'm doing readings, is that, there's no you're perfect just the way you are, and being able to work through the blame game. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that those are all belief systems. It's what the mind's created. It's not the truth. Yeah. So as you look back, what do you think the main influence that, let me see, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I'm sorry. What are the main messages that Mary states that, as you look back, had the most influence on you?
To be yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to open your heart and be yourself and let go. Allow it would be the masters. Allow them, that energetic level, to work with you, and breathe and let it in like the divine breath. Mm-hmm. That when you allow that to happen, and she used the term, and in the right spirit, meaning allowing part of it, that it almost seems miraculous. Don't color it. Don't make it complicated. The simplicity holds power.
Mhm.
That's also in our manuals, but it's true. The simplicity holds power.
Mhm.
You don't have to appear smart.
Yeah, and I've always, what keeps coming up in my records, the more and more that I do this work, the more and more they talk about the simplicity of the mind and letting go of those old belief systems that keep us so confined and the things that control us. The more and more simple our mind is, the more empty, then the more that we're in alignment with who we're meant to be. And I like that message.
Mhm.
So what do you feel like Mary's main legacy is?
If you're in alignment with your inner divinity, you don't have to go somewhere or make it happen.
Mm,
Because your essence is your being. It is. It's not, it transcends the world of action. If you just that letting go and go deep enough so you are still, that's a deep stillness and quiet enough that what emerges is something filled with grace and divine love and a place for you really to be at home
mhm.
on earth. That's her main teaching.
And that's significant. I mean, that is so important. And what a beautiful understanding to have if you can master that, for sure.
Yes.
So why do you think it's important to be able to maintain that?
We live in a world where we often think we have to get, do, achieve, um, make it happen. It's a kind of philosophy that has its place to some degree,
Mhm.
but there's a place that's deeper that sources that area. In other words, you may want to get somewhere because you're so rooted, you're so filled with love. You're like a fountain filled with love and connection. That's the source. It's like a great fountain coming up. Um, but it's very important that we start to let go and be so that we can see, perceive the spirit of another, the spirit of ourselves. So it's a very spiritual infusion, a very spiritual vision that she left. Also to value and respect the teachings. That was very important in the structure that she left.
Mhm. Yeah. So when we talk about the lineage, or the school of the Akashic Records, um, I find the term lineage is so intriguing because when we talk about lineage, we always put it in that category of some kind of family, like the history of the family, the grandparents, great grandparents, and as you go down the line. So when we're talking about the lineage of the Akashic Records, what are you referring to?
Um, we definitely have a particular lineage. It's an approach. Um, we emphasize grace. We have a certain way that we shape how we access the records for good. Um, we have boundaries. We don't crawl into other people's minds, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
which some people do that, and that is what they do. So it's a particular way of doing it. There are other schools. For instance, in India, the Indian traditional one is much more linear. This happened on July 21st, blah blah blah. and this is blocked by this, and this karma is blocked by this. And now I'm not minimizing it, because there are very wise people working that way. It's just different.
Yeah, just different.
It's just different. And since we started, since I started, there are many offshoots of people working in different ways through different balancings of their energy system. That they emphasize different kinds of things. And it's very clear to me that I'm coming from quiet moments with Mary Parker, and that did build the value to me of perpetuating what I call this lineage. So I'm not going to change. I may research or add to it, but fundamentally, I will not change the core. Yeah. It's a core lineage.
Yeah, yeah. So I think being able to understand that there's a number of different ways that people can access the Akashic Records, and there's a number of different ways that they can be used. And there's lots of teachers, and there's lots of different techniques, but our baby is Mary Parker's method. And what you and I resonate with, and what feels the most comfortable to us, is her process. And so not ever saying that anything is right or wrong or good or bad, because it's absolutely not. I mean, everybody has their own niche and what feels right for them and what they feel like they're in alignment with. But you and I are a little bit partial, should we say?
I'm very partial.
Yeah, and it's. I think it's because for me, it's because I feel the sacredness in the specific. I can't even talk specific technique and what it brings to me, and I honor this specific method. And again, I know that there's a number, and nobody's right or wrong. Everybody has their own way. Everybody receives information their own ways. They have their own guides. They have their own resources. Everybody's different. There's not one person. You and I are not the same. We use the same technique, to access the Akashic field, but we also have different ways of receiving our information, and they may affect us each differently. So I want to make sure that the point is made that we honor all. We honor all of these different techniques, and every individual that has the ability to do this work, I honor you. But we just want to share our method so that people can become a little bit more educated and learn a little bit more about how we do this. So with that being said, you are a teacher. So would you like to share what you teach and how people can get in contact with you?
Oh, yes. I teach all the levels of the Akashic Record Consultants International. I'm a founding partner of it, an old timer, I guess you could say. And you can go on my website, which is www.dynamicmanifestation.com. It's dynamicmanifestation, dynamicmanifestation.com. I did write a book, and the website's named after the book.
Okay, good. Do you want to talk real quick about what the book is about?
The book talks about manifestation and allowing to go deep enough. It's not about the Akashic Records exactly. Okay. It was done with the Akashic Records accessed or open. But the main point of the book, and there are some interesting parables which are composite clients of mine and myself mixed together. But the main point is we do more to block manifestation. It can't remain abstract. In other words, if you get an idea, you say, this is really a good idea, and I'm going to do this and that, and that's it. It's not going to manifest. We have to pull it. We have to bring it into the third dimension, the world of action. So do something. It can be a picture. It can be something you write. Otherwise, the pathway. It's like damming up the pathway. So then there are different examples of that, and that spiritual is not different than physical. That the physical is illuminated in many ways. That was an important point in the book.
Good. And where can people purchase that book?
The book is on Amazon, or they can get it from me. I have autographed copies of it. I'll autograph a copy, and I have a special consultation and such that people are doing right now. Okay. And my weekly work is consultations. That's what I do.
Okay, great. And so they can go to your website and schedule their sessions with you there.
Yes, I don't have a new schedule, but they can write to me easily. They can submit their name.
Okay, perfect. Well, Ellena, thank you. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your experience and sharing your journey with us. I'm all truly grateful. So thank you, and I will see all of you guys the next time.
Yes, thank you. I love working with you. It's just a real thrill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.